Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we talk all things Colorado Rockies. It's here, folks. Opening day is finally here. Tell your kids, tell your wife, tell your husband, tell your grandparents, Rockies baseball is finally back. Whether you like it or not, the Rockies play baseball today. And man, the offseason felt like it was longer than usual. I think a big part of that is just there is, like I talked about in the last episode, a bit of a renewed energy just because of the new front office, some of the moves that were made. And ultimately, I think there's a lot of recognition that the season might be difficult for the Rockies, but there are a lot of things that it's okay to be excited about for some of these younger players. And so for the Colorado Rockies, they play the Miami Marlins today in what should be probably one of their more favorable series for about the first month and a half of the season. And so it will be a pretty interesting series between the Rockies and the Marlins, two teams that are not expected to make the playoffs. And maybe that's also why they didn't want to play on really opening day with everyone else on Thursday. So regardless, Rockies versus Marlins today. And we know Kyle Freeland is going to be on the bump for the Rockies to kick things off. But as I'm recording, they don't have the lineup set in stone. So I figured I'd like to go over maybe some possible options. Now, look, the Rockies are going to be facing off against three right-handed pitchers in this series. And so because of that lineup might make things look a little bit different. Ultimately, in a perfect world, I would love to see Britton Doyle lead off. Against three righties, though, I could see Jake McCarthy being the guy. He has elite speed. He's a left-handed batter. And I could see McCarthy at the top of the lineup because of that. From there, though, 2 through 4, this is where the Rockies' bats are at their best. Even 2 through 5, I would go Tovar, Goodman, Moniak, and Jordan Beck. You want to get as many at-bats as possible for these guys. And for Goodman, I mean, obviously he has such good power, same as Moniak, that I would really just like to see those bats at the top of the lineup. I think there's even an argument to be had that Tovar leads off for the Rockies, just because I think for both Doyle and McCarthy, they've both shown maybe their struggles at the plate. Doyle has actually shown more promise, right? You jump back to the 2024 season, and he had a really solid bat. 2025, one of the big issues, though, is he struggled against the fastball. He was great against it in 2024. 2025, not so much. And that's why, I could see the argument to have Doyle maybe a little bit further down in the order for when the season kicks off. But regardless, that's kind of what I'm thinking 1 through 5. 6 through 9 is where it gets interesting. You could really slot Doyle anywhere in there. You could have him at 6. You could also make the argument, hey, why not just have him kind of lead off the lineup again at batting 9th? But I would say put Britton Doyle in the 6th spot, Castro 7, Rumfield starting first baseman at 8, and Kyle Karros at 3rd, batting 9th for the Colorado Rockies. Obviously, this is just a prediction. There are a lot of places, though, that want to see Edward Julian in that starting lineup because he's a lefty bat. If that's the case, Edward Julian gets a nod at 2nd and Castro's moved to 3rd. Regardless of the lineup, I want Edward Julian batting 9th. I really think, I understand you want that lefty on righty battle. I just think because of the issues we've seen with Edward Julian at the plate, you have him bat the 9 hole. And truthfully, I would rather just see Kyle Karros start over Edward Julian. But I get the argument to be made. You want to have as many lefty bats as possible. The Rockies have a few on this roster, and a couple will be starting. Mickey Moniak, Jake McCarthy, and then you've got Julian, who could be starting on opening day. Again, I know I've talked about this, but we've heard so much about raising the floor and guys having to earn their spot and et cetera. And I just don't think Edward Julian's done that. I don't think he's earned the spot for the Colorado Rockies. He got traded for, that's not a reason to start someone because you made a trade for them. It just isn't. It just isn't. And Edward Julian, he hasn't proven it. He has struggled since his rookie season. He has gotten worse since his rookie season. But again, if it's because you want a lefty bat, so be it. Brett Sullivan, who has proven it and earned a roster spot this spring, is a lefty, and Troy Johnson, that other lefty on the roster for the bats for the Colorado Rockies. So it will be interesting to see what Warren Schaefer does with that starting lineup. We'll see. I do think there is a world they start Edward Julian just because they want a lefty vet who will play second and Castro at third. Defensively, though, I think the Rockies are actually better if you put Karros at third and Castro at second. But regardless, that's kind of my prediction of that starting lineup for the Colorado Rockies. They have some elite speed this year in Doyle and McCarthy, and I do think the bats will be better. I think Tovar is going to have a bounce-back year. Goodman and Moniak, we know their power. Jordan Beck has a chance to build on that 2025 season. Willie Castro was an all-star. He struggled at the plate last year, and that's kind of the story for some of these guys. They have a chance to bounce back. And then, of course, the newcomers, Rumfield and Karros. Look, they are young guys who are hungry to prove something. Both had really great springs, and I am honestly so excited to see both those two guys play and what they're able to produce at the major league level. Because it's one thing to produce at the spring level. It's a whole new beast when you're facing off against, obviously, the best of the best. And the Miami Marlins do have one thing, and that's some really solid pitching. Sandy Alcantara and Yuri Perez are going to be the first two guys that they face. And look, if you look at the stats from really both of these guys, you're going to say, these guys, they didn't have an elite 2025. Both were recovering from a Tommy John surgery that had them both missing all of 2024. But look, Sandy still has a pretty nasty fastball, produces a lot of ground balls, and he's going to get the nod for opening day. But truthfully, Yuri Perez is still very young and very talented. He was in the Cy Young race even as a rookie. Obviously missed 2024 due to Tommy John, and then had honestly a solid season coming back in 2025. He did give up some hard hit balls, and I'm sure that is one thing that he would like to improve this season. But that's going to be a really tough matchup for this Rockies lineup. Just facing two really, really star-studded pitchers. Alcantara does have to prove a little bit more because he is a bit older now. He'll be 30 this year, and so that will be something. The Rockies do luck out though. Kyle Stowers, who's one of the best players in baseball, one of the best outfielders in baseball, out with a hamstring strain. And he kind of had a Hunter Goodman-esque type of rise in 2025, but better. 288 batting average, 544 slugging. His OPS was over 900. He is a phenomenal baseball player and will not be in this series. So that is a huge benefit to the Rockies pitching staff. And it's lucky that they get to dodge him. Alternatively, though, Agustin Ramirez, he is going to be someone to watch out for the Marlins. Young catcher who made his debut last year. He does provide quite a bit for the Marlins, so in this lineup. And look, the Marlins were kind of middle of the road just in general. They finished 4 games under 500 in 2025, but They've got some talent, and they're pitching. Even though they traded Edward Cabrera to the Cubs, they still have talent in this pitching staff. And so it will be a pretty interesting matchup between the Rockies and the Marlins, two teams that our expectations aren't the highest, is probably the nicest way of putting it. I think one of the hard things, though, is this Rockies starting rotation. Look, the X factor in general for the Colorado Rockies this season is going to be that starting rotation. And X factor is usually like, hey, this is the primetime player, but it's the Rockies' greatest deficiency across the board. I think the bullpen will be better. I think the starting line, or that lineup 1 through 9 will be better. But the starting rotation 1 through 5, I think it will be better than last year. But that's not really saying much because the starting rotation last year was so bad. And now you have veteran pitchers, but how much do they actually have left in the tank? I think that's a big question because you signed a lot of guys that are 34 plus years old. These are older pitchers that can lose a little bit of steam, a little bit of mustard on their pitches. And so that's going to be a big question. On top of that, not only are they older, they're pitching in one of the hardest environments in maybe all of sports, and that's Coors Field. Hardest place to pitch in Major League Baseball. That's a tall task for some vets, but they obviously are probably a bit more mentally tough than if you're throwing out a younger guy who's getting shelled every 5 nights. So there's some pros and cons to the starting rotation. I do like the approach, though, of going all vets. I still think I would like to see Dollander over Feltner, but I do get why Feltner gets the nod because we've seen him at least have some success back in 2024. Ultimately, though, the starting rotation, look, I was going to say have to be great, and I think that's asking too much, but if they can even be solid this year and give you quality starts that can go into the 6th inning where the Rockies aren't trailing by 5 or 6 runs, that's a really big deal. And then, of course, the bullpen, which is a young bullpen, but some really, really talented arms. And then, of course, this lineup has a lot of young bats. We talked about it last episode. There's about 9 guys making their opening day debut today. And so there will be more guys making their debut later in the season. I think Charlie Condon, Cole Carrig. Obviously, we expect Zach Veen to be called up at some point. He's obviously made his debut, but just more young names that are hopefully hungry to prove themselves because that's what 2026 will be all about, a building block year. We're not expecting the Rockies to go to win 90 games. But if they can win 60, 65, 70 feels like a pipe dream. It shouldn't, but it feels like a pipe dream. But if they can be anywhere in that range of winning 60 to 70 games, that's really big for just some building blocks and building maybe some aspirations. But they've clearly taken the approach to signing vets, to getting guys that can be clubhouse leaders for this younger generation of players that we've mentioned. And so in this series, that was kind of a big world view. We look now into a closer view. This series against the Marlins, as I said, it's the most favorable series that the Rockies will have until really they play the Reds at the end of April. It's just going to be a gauntlet from end of March until end of April, and even the Reds will be a challenging series. But because of that, hopefully the Rockies come out, play with some urgency. Obviously, going 2-1 would be an awesome start to the year. That Yuri Perez start, I think, in terms of just like looking at overall matchup between pitchers, him versus Michael Lorenzen is pretty lopsided. But Lorenzen has shown that he can still give you some really quality innings. And so we'll see. But if the Rockies can open this series with a 2-1 record, would be honestly a really big deal. Just because of how bad last year went, you might draw some belief from fans, players, front office, you name it. And then you play Toronto, and then you play a bunch of really good baseball teams. But regardless, my hope is the Rockies can win about 65 games, win this opening series against the Marlins, take 2 from them, and then from there, we'll just see. We'll see how they survive the gauntlet of end of March and all of April. But regardless, folks, it's opening day. You did it. You made it to the end of the video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment about what you're excited for opening day. Because look, folks, it's here. It's here. We need to cheer on our boys in purple. And yeah, I'm just excited for the season, excited to see some of the positive storylines that develop and, be able to go from there. So regardless, thank you so much for watching. I'm Scott Ayers. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a wonderful opening day, and I will see you on Monday.